Poor Maid exposes husband's dark scheme, transforming billionaire's life forever. Clara navigated the pristine marble halls of the high-rise, her heart pounding, not from the exertion of the day's work, but from a growing sense of dread. She was just a maid in the bustling chaos of New York City, yet today felt different. As she pushed her cart past plush carpets and glistening chandeliers, whispers of deceit wound through her mind, casting shadows over her dutiful routine. Over the months, she'd come to see Jonathan Blake not merely as a wealthy employer, but as a man shackled in a gilded cage, a prisoner to his own life. The smell of lemon-scented polish filled her lungs. It grounded her, yet didn't ease the anxiety thrumming in her chest. She had stumbled upon troubling inconsistencies in his financial documents. They popped up like landmines, threatening to explode her fragile world. Clara's hands trembled when she thought of what she had overheard. Secrets exchanged low and hushed, Vanessa and shady associates conspiring like puppet masters, pulling strings only they could see. Should she say something? But what if it cost her the only job she could ever sustain? This dilemma gnawed at her. A sudden chill swept through her veins. Was she a fool for caring? Fear settled in her stomach as Clara pushed a stray hair behind her ear and glanced around, ensuring she was alone. The penthouse was a magical world of wealth, yet eerily disconnected. She felt a kinship with Jonathan. He too seemed lost, a man drowning in his riches. As she cleaned his desk, she resolved to unearth the truth, risking it all for someone who saw her not just as a maid, but as a human being. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The anxiety grew heavier, compressing her thoughts as she discovered a family legacy, hidden ledgers that told tales of worth beyond mere dollars. Each line, every decimal, hinted at connections Jonathan had yet to reclaim. Time seemed to spin in slow motion as dawn broke, illuminating a window into a struggle that extended beyond their own conflicts. She had to protect him, the gravity of her loyalty weighing against the precarious nature of her existence. But as Clara pieced together the web of Jonathan's past, Vanessa's icy demeanor seemed to shift, lurking and waiting. Fear twisted her insides as she realized the imminent danger of her actions, both for Jonathan and herself. What if her quest for justice spiraled?
Felt electric, a jolt of adrenaline sparking through her veins. A mixture of apprehension and interest flickered across his face. Clara continued, her heart hammering as she spoke. Each revelation about Vanessa's dealings cascaded forth, her voice quavering yet gaining strength. Jonathan's shock was palpable, crumbling the facade of an untouchable billionaire. His lips parted as she laid out everything she had uncovered, the finance documents, subtle manipulations, whispers exchanged in the dark, each revelation weaving a clearer picture of the web they were both trapped in. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Jonathan breathed, a tumult of emotions welling in his eyes, fear, acknowledgement, and a solemn gratitude. "I didn't know how, and I was scared, but I can't allow her to pull you down with her." The honesty stripped layers off Jonathan's iciness. It revealed not only vulnerability, but an understanding of shared predicaments. Clara saw him in a new light. This man, once just a figure of wealth and privilege, was now a potential ally, fighting against the very forces that oppressed him and threatened their world. She wasn't just risking her job anymore. She was becoming a catalyst for change, carving a path towards hope. But as the conversation flowed, replete with raw truths and budding trust, the air thickened with tension. The fragile alliance began to form, yet the looming shadow of Vanessa felt ever closer, a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Clara inhaled deeply, the doubt nibbling at the edges of her courage. Her instincts warned her that this was merely the calm before an inevitable storm. The time was drawing near when her encounter with Vanessa couldn't be avoided any longer. Clara's resolve reformed into an urgent clarity. She needed a plan, and fast. And in the flickering moment of connection with Jonathan, a new realization settled in her psyche. It was no longer just about protecting him. It was also about owning her worth and agency in a world that often saw her as invisible. The stage was set for a confrontation she would not shy away from. But what awaited her on the other side? Clara steeled herself, knowing truth now flowed as freely from her lips as the fear of discovery danced in their shadows. Clara stared at the vibrant city skyline from the penthouse window, her mind racing, plotting the course of action that would lead her deeper into the treacherous waters of betrayal and deceit. She could feel the tension humming in the atmosphere, a palpable undercurrent that urged her to take swift action. The time for hesitation had dissipated like morning fog. It was replaced with a burgeoning sense of purpose alongside the underlying threat presented by Vanessa. The shocking revelations she had laid before Jonathan spun in her mind. For the first time, she felt not just the weight of her own fear, but also the thrill of newfound courage. She was not alone in this battle, yet the path before them remained murky. The trust they had started to form was fragile, a house of cards poised to collapse with a single destabilizing wind: Vanessa. Clara's thoughts narrowed, focused on how they could fortify their position. As the sun dipped lower, painting the skies in hues of orange and violet, Clara devised a plan. She would need to gather more evidence, solid, irrefutable proof of Vanessa's duplicity that could illuminate every dark corner of the manipulation happening behind Jonathan's back. The task loomed ahead of her, but Clara embraced it. Each piece of information she had secured so far felt like ammunition, adding to her arsenal rather than trapping her in a quagmire of lies. The following day at work, she moved with purpose, her movements deliberate, her interactions charged. Clara had always been observant, but now she harnessed that skill with intention, watching for any revealing signs that might slip from Vanessa's lips or gestures. She needed her to let down her guard, if only for a moment. In quiet moments, Clara caught glimpses of the interplay between Jonathan and Vanessa, moments that felt heavy with underlying tension and undisclosed thoughts. Each casual exchange resonated in her mind, pushing her to analyze Vanessa's motivations and strategies. To fight Vanessa, Clara needed to understand her, dissect her methods, and anticipate her moves. Through the next days, the energy of the penthouse shifted around Clara. She spent evenings poring over documents she had managed to keep hidden, honing her understanding of the financial tactics employed to orchestrate this deception. She moved through the chaos, balancing her duties while remaining vigilant to the nuances of conversation, capturing snippets of information like a skilled acquirer of truths. There was a moment, during a holiday party held in the grand ballroom, when Vanessa's facade almost slipped. Taking advantage of the celebratory atmosphere, Clara strategically approached Jonathan, who was caught in a more relaxed state. She casually mentioned an upcoming meeting with Vanessa regarding a new investment opportunity, watching Jonathan's face for any cues. The flicker of concern that crossed his features ignited a spark. This was it, the chance to leverage his unease and align him more closely with her intentions. "Mr. Blake, I believe we should prepare for that meeting differently," she suggested, injecting an edge of confidence into her tone. "Let's gather more context from the past transactions. We can arm ourselves with knowledge before our next discussion." Jonathan nodded slowly, an uncertain look transformed slowly into one of determination. This small moment, where their motivations aligned, felt monumental to Clara. In that instant, the dynamic shifted. Suddenly, they were not just a maid and her employer, but co-strategists on a mission. But as the evening progressed, Clara felt Vanessa's calculating gaze sweep over them, a predator observing its prey.
The pressure of the dance floor felt stifling, and for a moment, Clara's heart raced as she realized what was at stake. In the deep recesses of her mind, the transformation she was undergoing began to cement itself. Was no longer just passive. She was engaged in a plan unfolding like the promising blooms of spring, brilliant yet fragile. She sensed that this alliance with Jonathan could genuinely disrupt Vanessa's manipulations, dismantling her schemes brick by brick. But the clock was ticking. Clara's instincts buzzed with urgency. The moment to confront Vanessa head-on was approaching, and with it, Clara sensed a reckoning that could easily spiral out of control. Would she be able to maintain the fragile balance of her transformations while facing the looming threat of betrayal? As she caught sight of Vanessa making her way through the crowd, the final piece of her carefully constructed puzzle fell into place. The confrontation she now had to plan would not only define her worth, but would also test the very limits of her courage. What was to come, Clara wondered, as she felt a shiver of anticipation run through her body. It was time to finalize her strategy, a strategy that could either liberate her from the shadows or plunge her deeper into the chaos. Clara awoke the next morning with a determination that surged through her like wildfire. The city outside, bathed in the early light, seemed to echo her resolve. Breakfast was a blur, mere sustenance to fuel her mind for the day ahead. As she stood at the sink, scrubbing an espresso cup, she reminded herself that in the world of shadows and deception, clarity was her greatest weapon. Today was pivotal. Confronting Vanessa required precision. Clara had spent nights assembling fragments of knowledge, meticulously piecing together the narrative of deceit that seemed to wind deeper than she initially suspected. With Jonathan increasingly becoming her ally, she sensed that this was the moment where she could transform from a passive observer into an active participant in reclaiming justice. Arriving at work, Clara allowed a moment for her ambitions to settle into her skin. She brushed her hair behind her ear, straightened her back, and approached her desk with renewed focus. Each report, each document that crossed her path felt charged. Awareness hung heavily in the air. She was aware of every look cast her way and scrutinized every offhand comment made in the office. That morning, she positioned herself in the common area, watching Vanessa from a distance. Clara's breath caught as Vanessa laughed with a group of colleagues, her perfectly composed demeanor masking the treachery Clara knew lay beneath. It was unnerving to think that beneath those charming smiles, a calculated mind was always at work. Clara needed to shift the narrative. Even the slightest slip of Vanessa's mask would help her build a stronger case. Over the course of the day, she engaged her colleagues gently, asking casual yet probing questions about recent meetings they had with Vanessa. She noted how often references to investment strategies were carefully sidestepped, how colleagues whispered their concerns under hushed tones. With each response, Clara pulled the threads tighter, ensuring the connections pointed back to Vanessa's devious handiwork. That evening, while the office buzzed with unsuspecting chatter, Clara found a key in the stack of documents hidden in her desk. It was a note, an outline of projected financial gains tied to a deal that seemed too good to be true. The discrepancy between the figures and the projected risks tugged at her brain like a nagging itch. It was time to analyze this document further. As she remained focused, her mind didn't just sharpen with knowledge, it opened doors to unchallenged options. Clara had started to overlook the reservations she had about herself. Why had she dismissed her keen analytical skills for so long? Each revelation she unraveled became empowerment, revealing her competence and value that even she hadn't fully recognized. But with power came anxiety. Would daring to confront Vanessa risk everything she had worked for? The division between the maid and the ambitious strategist began to dissolve. Would she remain unseen, or should she step into the limelight, a role she reluctantly craved? Each question tightened the knot in her stomach. Clara made her way to Jonathan later that evening. Their previous collaboration felt electric, and she carefully laid out her findings, her voice steady and deliberate. "I believe we can leverage Vanessa's actions to our advantage," she asserted. Jonathan's brow furrowed, absorbing the gravity of her words. This might reveal the truth and turn the tide in our favor. Glancing at him, she saw a spark of realization igniting in his eyes. No longer was she a mere maid, she had become a partner in reshaping their narratives. But as the weight of their discussion settled over them, Clara felt a stinging awareness creeping in. Vanessa would not take their alliance lightly. The final confrontation loomed closer, and with it the possibilities of both victory and loss. Clara had climbed a mountain of uncertainty, but that only heightened the stakes. In her heart, she wondered if the decisions she made now would mark the beginning of her liberation, or push her deeper into the pit she had sought to escape. Tomorrow, she thought, it all changes. And as the night enveloped the city, she braced herself for the inevitable clash of wills, knowing that every choice from this moment could redefine the map of her reality. Was she ready to confront Vanessa and uncork the bottled tension that threatened to explode? Clara slid her fingers over the papers littering her desk as the morning sun streamed in through the blinds. Each document reflected the culmination of her efforts, her transformation from an unseen cog in the machine to a woman assertively navigating the labyrinth of corporate intrigue. She glanced at her reflection in the glass, her resolve etched in the lines of her face. Today wouldn't be just another day. It would be the day she stepped fully into her power. She felt the weight of her choices pressing against her chest, a reminder that what lay ahead would paint her future with bold strokes. As colleagues shuffled into the
office, Clara's heart raced in sync with the pulsing energy around her. It wasn't just about what she was going to confront, it was about acknowledging the person she had become, a resourceful, strategic thinker, no longer relegated to the background. She took a deep breath, centering her thoughts. Today would be methodical. Mid-morning, as conversation bubbled, Clara observed Vanessa engaging with a few managers. Every laugh from Vanessa felt like a jibe against Clara's quiet ambitions, fueling the fire inside her. She knew that deep behind those charming smiles, Vanessa's empire of lies stood on shaky ground. Clara had spent the past weeks refining her strategy, mapping out conversations with colleagues, attempting to reveal the cracks in Vanessa's facade. This knowledge empowered her, but the doubts lingered. What if her findings weren't enough? The thought flickered in her head like a candle on a windy night, yet she steadily quelled it. She had to believe. Self-doubt was no longer an option. During lunch, Clara joined Jonathan in the break room, the air thick with anticipation. "I've pieced together the documents we discussed," Clara said, her voice firm as she slid a folder towards him. "There's a pattern here that connects Vanessa to the irregularities we've noted." As Jonathan rifled through the papers, his brow lined with concentration, Clara felt a surge of camaraderie. They were no longer just co-workers, they were allies on a crusade. "This could expose more than just Vanessa's actions," he said, looking up sharply. "If we present this properly, it could unroll a cascade of consequences." The risk exhilarated Clara. The thought of laying bare Vanessa's schemes filled her with adrenaline. But she knew they had to be careful. The office was a stage, and they were players in a drama fraught with peril. "We'll need to gather evidence discreetly," she replied, her mind whirring into overdrive as plans collided with possibilities. As the day unfolded, Clara's instincts sharpened. Every interaction she had was informed by her desire for justice. When pressed with mundane queries about the company's performance, she artfully steered conversations into less dense territories. Listening, probing, gathering fragments of what could become the backbone of her case against Vanessa. But deep-seated anxiety continued gnawing at her resolve. It wasn't just about dismantling Vanessa. It was about casting off the shadows of self-doubt that had once dictated her existence. Clara recognized the pivotal moment lying in wait. Every small decision she made now directly correlated to whether she would embrace her emerging identity or shrink back into conformity. Hours later, an electric atmosphere filled the office when word spread about Vanessa's impending meeting with the upper management. Clara's heart raced, not just for the chaos it would inspire, but for the opportunity it presented. This was her moment to intercept, to act. With Jonathan by her side, they stared down the path ahead, one littered with the ruins of an immaculate facade. As Vanessa strode past them, confidence radiating from her, Clara sensed the impending clash, electrifying the air.
Here it was, their crossroads. Would Clara burst through the plate glass of deception, or would she be silenced? The decision loomed heavy, and Clara could almost taste the tension as she whispered her plan to Jonathan. Would she embrace the risk of confrontation? Taking a breath, she gripped her dossier tighter, ready to stand firm against the storm brewing within her. The confrontation lay just before her, with everything she had worked for poised to change forever. The moment of truth awaited, and within that pulse beat her burgeoning identity, one that sought not only vengeance but vindication. Would she rise victorious or be caught in the very web she sought to unravel? As the clock ticked down to the confrontation, Clara felt the world sharpen to a point of focus. It was time to step into the light, to challenge the darkness surrounding her and emerge transformed. Clara's pulse quickened as she stood outside the conference room, the weight of the dossier heavy in her hands. Each page represented not just a collection of evidence, but the culmination of her struggle to reclaim her agency. The gentle hum of office chatter faded away, replaced by the thunderous beat of her heart echoing in her ears. She exchanged a glance with Jonathan, a silent acknowledgment of the storm they were about to weather together. When the door swung open, Clara was engulfed in a sea of faces, some familiar, others filled with authority and judgment. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, her confident demeanor barely wavering as the spotlight shifted toward her. Clara felt the old insecurities whispering in her mind, urging her to retreat, to slip back into her role as the observer. But today she couldn't allow that to happen. She had learned that weakness was not an option. As the meeting commenced, Vanessa presented her routine updates, her voice smooth like silk, cloaking her deceit. Clara's resolve hardened. This was the moment, her moment, to dismantle the illusion. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed the dossier in front of Jonathan, who discreetly flipped it open. "Clara?" Vanessa's voice sliced through the tension, catching her off guard. "What do you think? Anything to add?" The challenge was blatant, a bait to catch her in a snare of uncertainty. Clara inhaled deeply, the air and courage mixing into a potent concoction. "Actually, yes," she replied, infusing her tone with conviction as the room grew quiet. Around the table, heads turned, expressions transforming from apathy to intrigue. With each point she articulated from the dossier, Clara felt the chains of her past decisions shatter. Vanessa's veneer began to crack under Clara's scrutiny. Subtle glances exchanged between the upper management revealed neither surprise nor disbelief, but rather a growing sense of concern. Clara was not the naive employee they thought she was. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with. As she presented her evidence, Clara realized the significance of her actions extended beyond confronting Vanessa. She was challenging the complacency that had governed her life and the lives of those around her. Each detail she disclosed illuminated corruption, but more importantly, they illuminated her own potential. Clara wasn't just executing a plan, she was claiming her narrative, sculpting her professional identity. An unexpected interruption came when one of the senior executives interjected. "Are you suggesting this is a deliberate scheme by Vanessa? It's a serious allegation." Clara's resolve faltered for a brief moment under the weight of scrutiny. What if she was wrong? The anxiety gnawed at her, a familiar bitterness. Yet, as she scanned the faces of the room, she remembered her journey, the long nights spent gathering information, the support from Jonathan, and her commitment to justice. She swallowed her doubt and pressed on.
Yes, I am. Here's the data to support it. Clara's voice took on a steady, unwavering cadence, driven by an electric urgency. She could feel her life shifting beneath her, a metamorphosis taking place. The room buzzed with murmurs as she laid out the figures that linked Vanessa to the discrepancies, each revelation igniting the flickering flames of accountability within her colleagues. The confrontation escalated. Vanessa no longer exuded confidence, but desperation. Clara's instinct guided her through the back-and-forth exchanges, persuasive yet calm. She was no longer a subordinate. She had become the arbiter of truth in a room filled with tension. The scales were tipping, and for the first time, Clara understood the power of her voice. Just as the meeting reached a crescendo, the door swung open to reveal the HR director, a look of urgency on her face. "We need to speak immediately, Vanessa," she said. The unmistakable tremor in her voice injected a fresh wave of nerves into the room. Clara's heart raced, but not from fear. It was the thrill of victory surging through her veins, flushing away the remnants of self-doubt. She had stepped into the fray, and nothing would ever be the same. As Vanessa turned pale and the impending inquiry loomed large, Clara couldn't help but smile inwardly. The tide had turned. But as she glanced around the room, the stakes felt higher than ever. Would this truly bring about the change she desired, or would it unleash a backlash that might just tighten the noose around her newfound resolve? The moment was morphing into something greater, and Clara realized that her journey had only just begun. Where would this path lead her next, and at what cost? Clara's thoughts raced like wildfire in her mind as the HR director's abrupt entrance marked a turning point. There was no moment to bask in her small victory. The urgency in the HR director's tone hinted at a far greater storm brewing beneath the surface. Vanessa's expression morphed from anger to shock, revealing her vulnerability. In that instant, Clara felt an unsettling thrill. Could this be the shift she needed to ensure accountability? Or was she stepping into a trap? The rest of the meeting was a blur as her colleagues whispered softly, their glances oscillating between the two women. Clara's heart pounded. Could she turn this precarious moment into her advantage? Was the investigation a chance or a threat to her newfound strength? She swayed in her chair, the boundaries of possibility blurring around her. Once the door closed behind the HR director and Vanessa, an awkward silence stretched across the room. Eyes darted around, and whispers blended into a low buzz as uncertainty filled the air. Clara's stomach twisted as she recognized the audacity of her claims had poured fuel onto an already blazing inferno. She caught Jonathan's eye, seeking his assurance, but she knew, ultimately, the burden of navigation lay squarely on her shoulders now. A senior executive leaned in, breaking the silence. "Clara, what happens if they discredit your findings? You know the stakes. This could cost you everything." His words anchored in Clara's mind, a chilling reminder of her vulnerability. The path she walked now was fraught with potential backlash. Could she manage the scrutiny? The urge to reassure herself tugged at her resolve, but she pushed it back. Her growth had not come from playing safe. It had taken courage to breach the silence. "I know what I'm asking," Clara replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "But these discrepancies can't go unchecked, not if we want integrity in our organization. There are consequences for allowing corruption to thrive." The room erupted into murmurs again, but she ceased to be just a face in the crowd. She could feel the shift. Her colleagues were no longer passive participants. They were awakening to the reality of their collective power. Questions began to buzz in the room. Some sought validation for Clara's findings, while others pondered their own complicity in the oversight. In that moment, Clara's intuition surged into a newfound wisdom. She could either prepare for a fight or capitulate to a familiar fear. She chose to stand firm. As they debated the ongoing implications, she found herself orchestrating the discussion, offering insights and solutions to safeguard the integrity of their operations.
Clara's old hesitations were swiftly melting away like ice in the sun. Yet, even as she led the charge, doubt slithered in, a remnant of her past life. What if she was treading into territory that could expose her? The question gnawed at her, reminding her of the very real threats that lingered. The memory of Vanessa's sharp tongue lingered, and the potential consequences from a vindictive superior felt real. Then a thought struck her. She had survived more than just the workplace's trials. This was about her whole life. Was she not the author of her story? The stakes were high, but so was the potential for transformation. She resolved to refocus on what she could control, the pursuit of truth, and the establishment of an environment where accountability flourished. As the meeting wound down, tension still thrumming in the air, Clara felt a heavy responsibility settle
On her shoulders, not just for herself, but for the team. Her colleagues were looking to her for leadership, for direction amid the chaos. With that realization came a flicker of fear, tempered by a growing sense of duty. Would she rise to this challenge? As they concluded, Clara's mind raced, plotting out the moves she could take to solidify her stance, to shield herself against potential fallout, and to fortify the group against complacency. Little did she know that Vanessa was already planning her counterattack, and that the fallout from this meeting would not just reshape the future of their company, but Clara's life forever. What would Clara do next? The path ahead seemed fraught with complexities, and the danger of exposure loomed large. The moment of truth was rapidly approaching, and she would need to prepare. Clara sat at her desk, the fluorescent lights above flickering unnaturally, mirroring the turbulence within her mind. The weight of the previous meeting pressed heavily on her shoulders. Peering around the otherwise sterile office space, she noticed the hesitant glances of her coworkers. It was as if they were waiting for her to provide an answer to an unspoken question. Could she really be their voice against Vanessa? As she sorted through paperwork, Clara's thoughts spiraled into a vortex of anxiety and determination. The gravity of her claims loomed like a shadow, threatening to swallow her whole. What had begun as an agonizing battle against workplace injustice had transformed into a personal crusade. She felt an intoxicating mix of dread and excitement. Clara understood that her actions would set a precedent. She was no longer just acting for herself, but for everyone within the organization who had swallowed their grievances for too long. Jonathan approached her desk, his brow furrowed. "Clara, are you all right?" The concern in his voice pierced through her chaotic thoughts. "Honestly, I'm terrified," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't turn back now. If I do, everything I fought for will mean nothing." He smiled, a hint of admiration lighting his features. "That's the Clara I know. You have to stay strong. People need you to lead this." With his words echoing in her mind, Clara decided to refocus. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to the page where she had begun to draft a strategic plan for navigating the complexities ahead. Researching past cases of workplace integrity violations, she began outlining key points that could reinforce her findings. Each stroke of her pen felt like a small victory, a step closer to solidifying her position. Just as she found her rhythm, a message pinged on her phone. Sensing a disturbance in her composed demeanor, she hesitated before opening it. It was from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing, and it might be better for you to back off." Cold dread washed over her. Clara's fingers tingled with fear, but a spark of rebellion ignited her resolve. Was this Vanessa's tactic to intimidate her? Perhaps it was someone else wanting to undermine her efforts. Either way, she realized she had entered a game where the stakes were life-altering. Determined to fortify her mental defenses, she crafted a response in her mind. A wall of silence would no longer protect her. She needed allies, and she needed to be transparent. Clara decided to convene an informal gathering with supportive colleagues that evening, intending to create a coalition dedicated not only to her cause, but rooted in the organization's ethics. If Vanessa was indeed strategizing a counterattack, Clara wouldn't face her adversary alone. As she prepared for the evening gathering, Clara caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of a nearby glass panel. For the first time, she no longer saw a timid worker, she saw a leader. The shadows of doubt that had plagued her past faded slightly, replaced by clarity and purpose. Yet in the surge of confidence, a nagging feeling persisted. The potential fallout from betrayal loomed large. Should her team turn on her, the backlash could obliterate everything she had fought for. But she had to walk this tightrope. Leadership was fraught with risk, and she yearned to chase the truth, no matter the cost. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting time, Clara felt the familiar knot of anxiety coil in her stomach. She would be stepping into the unknown, rallying support against the very forces that threatened her. What would happen when her colleagues heard her plan? Would they stand with her, or would fear triumph? A knock at her door jarred her from her thoughts. It was Jonathan, a calculating look in his eyes. "You need to hear this." His words hung in the air like a delicate thread. Clara's heart raced again, anticipation mingling with dread as she awaited the revelation that would shape the next turn in her battle. Would Jonathan reveal critical information about Vanessa? Or would this be another curveball leading her deeper into a conspiracy she couldn't fully grasp? The moment of truth loomed before her, and she braced herself. Jonathan stepped into her office, and Clara noticed the tightness of his jaw, a clear indication that he carried more than casual news. The weight of his presence seemed to settle in the air around them, amplifying the already electric tension that simmered within her. "What is it?" Clara asked, her voice steady but edged with urgency. He leaned closer, his tone lowered. "I've been hearing things. There's a group gathering information against you, and they've got their eyes on anyone who supports your cause, especially you." His eyes searched hers for confirmation, and Clara felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine. "Who are they?" Jonathan shook his head, frustration lining his features. "I don't know exactly, but I have my suspicions. I overheard them talking in the break room. It seems they're loyal to Vanessa. We need to move fast before they can do any damage." Every ounce of resolve that had fortified Clara's spirit now came crashing down. The familiar anxiety gripped her again, but this time it morphed into something else, an explosive determination. "Then we have to be strategic. If they want to play games, we will play better." He nodded, admiration flickering in his eyes. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Clara. You need to present a united front tonight at the gathering. Don't show fear, show clarity." Clara took a deep breath, her mind racing, spinning out potential plans. She could see the gathering unfolding in her mind, colleagues eager for change but simultaneously wary of repercussions. "Let's ensure everyone knows we're serious about this. I'll emphasize the importance of accountability and ethics tonight. Together, we can confront the narrative before they shape it against us." As they finalized the evening's agenda, Clara couldn't shake the nagging thoughts clawing at her. What if this was the moment where everything unraveled? What if Jonathan had made a mistake? Could she trust him completely? But beneath the apprehension lay a flicker of insight. Doubt was part of this dangerous journey. She couldn't succumb to it now. Jonathan paused, looking deep into her eyes. "You have to believe in this vision, Clara. It's not just about putting a stop to Vanessa. It's about unearthing a truth that's been buried for too long." The simplicity of his words should have soothed her, but instead they ignited a fire within. Clara stood taller, spurred on by her purpose. She was no longer merely fighting for justice within the walls of the office. She was also discovering her own capacity for leadership and resolve. That evening, she arrived at the gathering with a notebook filled with her strategies and a sharpened sense of commitment. The room buzzed with uncertainty, her colleagues shifting nervously in their chairs. Clara took a moment, silently gauging the atmosphere, and then spoke up. "I know many of you are afraid, but fear has held us back for far too long. If we don't stand together now, we will always be silenced." Murmurs rose, and a couple of faces nodded, but she could feel the hesitation. Clara pressed on, outlining her vision, focusing on empowerment and collective resolve rather than fear and retaliation. As she spoke, something changed in her. The stakes were high, but every word felt like a piece of armor she was donning for the battle ahead. Suddenly, the door swung open. It was Vanessa, eyes sharp and calculating, a storm sweeping into the heart of their gathering. Clara's heart pounded as she felt all eyes shift toward the impending confrontation. The time had come to face the true enemy head-on. Clara could feel the tension snap, realizing this was not just a pivotal moment for her coworkers, but for her own growth. Would she sink in self-doubt, or rise as the leader she had begun to envision? "What do you think you're doing?" Vanessa's cold voice sliced through the air, a fierce challenge clear in her gaze. Clara inhaled deeply, ready to embrace the fight that lay before her. Clara felt the tension in the room shift as Vanessa's presence darkened their collective resolve. This was no longer just about corruption. It had transformed into a confrontation of wills, and Clara's inner transformation in that moment crystallized before her. She stood tall, instinctively stepping forward, channeling the energy of her colleagues who had rallied behind her. In the silence that followed Vanessa's intrusion, Clara took a deep breath, bolstered by the weight of her transformations. "We're discussing accountability, Vanessa. We won't be silenced anymore." Her voice rang out, resonating with newfound authority and purpose. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her polished facade momentarily cracking. "Accountability means adhering to company protocols, Clara, a lesson you seem to have overlooked." The derision dripped from her tone, attempting to undermine Clara's burgeoning confidence. But Clara knew better now. She had spent countless hours gathering evidence, building a network among her peers, and fortifying her stance. "What I've overlooked is allowing fear to dictate our actions. If we want integrity in our workplace, we must confront the systemic issues head-on." The words fell from her lips, unwavering. The murmurs of support from her colleagues swirled around her, feeding her courage. They understood now. This battle transcended her own experience. It was a collective awakening. Each nod and whispered agreement strengthened her resolve, allowing Clara to step firmly into her role as a leader. Vanessa's expression shifted from condescension to suspicion. "You think you can sway the room, don't you? Better tread lightly, or this might cost you more than just your job." "Perhaps," Clara replied, a sense of fierce empowerment flooding through her. "But I'm more concerned with where our ethics stand." She lifted her chin, meeting Vanessa's icy glare, refusing to back down. "You've perpetuated a system built on deception. We're here to bring it to light." Suddenly, Clara felt it, a shift in the air, a palpable sense of empowerment blossoming as she laid her truth bare. The transformation from a timid maid to a determined catalyst for change was tangible within her. Her colleagues, buttressed by the shared spirit of her conviction, were reluctant to remain passive. It was clear, her courage had ignited something within them, and together they could spearhead this charge for accountability. As the confrontation intensified, a surprising ally emerged from the back of the room, a colleague Clara hadn't expected to stand beside her, a junior executive who had quietly listened for too long. "I support Clara. We all know there's a problem with the financial practices. This is our chance to reset the company's values." The declaration startled Vanessa, who momentarily faltered as murmurs of agreement spread like wildfire. One voice turned to two, and soon their ranks gathered in solidarity. "No more whispers behind closed doors," Clara asserted, powerfully bolstered by their united front. We are your colleagues, not your pawns. In that moment of clarity, Clara felt the chains of fear that once bound her dissolve. She had navigated treacherous waters and unearthed her agency. Now, her leadership manifested, not just in words, but in an undeniable current of shared resolve. She realized that confronting Vanessa was not merely about exposing corruption. It was about paving the way for a workplace founded on equity and respect. As the intensity peaked in the room, Vanessa attempted to regain control, her attempts veiled in bluster. "You think this will end well? You're all risking your jobs." For the first time, Clara looked around at the faces supporting her, illuminated by the shared fire for change ignited by her leadership. "We'd rather risk our jobs than lose our integrity. That's what true accountability costs." With this assertion, Clara understood her transformation complete. She had embraced her identity, conquered her fears, and established her rightful place within the organization's evolution as an empowered force for good. The stakes were high, she could feel that. But this was the moment when all of her efforts converged into one defining purpose: an unwavering commitment to reshape her professional future. Days turned into weeks as Clara and her colleagues worked tirelessly, gathering more evidence, holding meetings, and strategizing their next steps to ensure justice was served. The tide of support continued to swell, forcing upper management to confront the glaring issues Clara had brought to light. As the investigation unfolded and Vanessa was held to account, the recognition for Clara's courage began to cascade. Her superiors, initially skeptical, now regarded her with respect and acknowledgement. Colleagues, who had once viewed her as merely a maid, now hailed her as a leader, a woman who ignited the spark of change that would resonate well beyond their immediate surroundings. Clara had carved out a space not just for herself, but for all those who had ever felt invisible in the shadow of power. With each milestone, she proved to herself the extent of her competence, solidifying her status within the organization. Clara transitioned into a new role within management, directly overseeing initiatives that reinforced ethical practices and procedures. Her voice responded with authenticity, shaping policy that protected the entire team against further corruption. She had finally established her place where her visibility transformed into purpose. At the end of her journey, as she looked out at the city skyline from the lofted office she now called her own, a rush of pride washed over her. The quiet turmoil of her past was a distant memory, eclipsed by the certainty of her future. Nobody could undermine her achievements now. She had proven her worth not just to others, but to herself. Clara's triumph was marked by resilience, a journey from obscurity into a marketplace not just of ideas, but of execution. She had emerged victorious, having transformed every obstacle into an opportunity for growth. Now, as she stood there, her journey wasn't just a tale of personal discovery, it was a living testament to the power of collective courage. Clara smiled to herself, deeply satisfied in this moment of hard-earned triumph. Remember, you need to subscribe now to catch all the emotional journeys ahead. This is the moment to show your support. If you felt inspired by Clara's transformation, leave a like now to fuel the algorithm. Don't keep it to yourself. Comment your thoughts and theories about Clara's journey and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of individual change. Don't wait even one more second. Join the movement.